Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Data Standard Audio Experience. Today on our show, we have Chris Murphy, a senior lead data scientist at HomePoint. And today we're going to be speaking about balancing short and long-term successes. So welcome to the show, Chris. I'm excited to speak with you and just learn more about your field, your industry, and more about your background.
Cool. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Definitely. Could you tell us more about your background and experiences at HomePoint?
Yeah. So my background's in physics. I got my PhD from UCSD, so we have a connection there. After the PhD, I spent a few years doing research in physics before making the transition into data science. To help me in my transition, I was initially an artificial intelligence fellow at Insight. And in my current role, I'm on the data science team at HomePoint, which is a mortgage broker and servicer. We just went public. And at HomePoint, I'm working in consumer analytics and pricing.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's always fun to hear about just consumer analytics and pricing, just because that's where a lot of the fun happens with all of the data science for sure. And I wanted to hear more about the successes of your experiences and your company. So, how do you define success in regards to the workplace?
Yeah, great question. So to me, success is really a process. It's not like an individual event. So maybe going back a little bit with this example, but I could look at like, oh, my thesis defense was a success. But really it was all the steps that it took to get there, all the conferences and all the research, all the teaching assignments, all those steps along the way that really made the process of getting a PhD a success. And I try to take that approach to finding success in industry at HomePoint as well.
Yeah, definitely. And the overall big topic today has to do with short-term and long-term goals and successes in general. So, in your opinion, how would you define something as a short-term goal versus a long-term goal, and what should be kind of prioritized?
Yeah, I'm happy to take those in order. I think there's a couple different ways to break this down. So kind of in short term, they're kind of like a literal sense, like the time scales involved. So like a lot of times I try to wake up and think like, what do I want to accomplish today? Or you can often have very concrete things you want to accomplish in a given week. We have quarterly goals that we try to meet as well. So I tend to think like in one sense, those are the short term successes I'm trying to get after. Can I accomplish these things? So that's in contrast with long-term successes like trying to stand up a program. So for example, one thing I'm working on at the moment is coming up with a product that will predict funding volume at HomePoint over a given time period and broken out by lending channel. So some short-term successes there are, can we produce an uncertainty associated with the predictions for each lending channel? Can we get this system productionized? Can we predict on different timescales? So those are all kind of short-term successes that kind of have concrete deadlines. Whereas the long-term success, there's always going to be more we could build onto this program to make it more successful and more user-friendly. So that's kind of part of the longer process of eventually we'll have more sophisticated infrastructure in place to make this model run faster. We'll have more sophisticated algorithms at some point. So that's one sense in which I compartmentalize short versus long-term successes. But a different approach on that is, so kind of what I was describing there was all sort of self-consistent in that, those shorter term successes were feeding into an eventual longer term success. But data science isn't just something that's done in isolation. We work in close collaboration with our business colleagues. So it's important to make contact with them on a regular basis. And so I think another way in which you could think about short versus long-term successes, it's not necessarily helpful for the business if we're taking forever to get this great project done, because then it's not really super useful for the business. So we want to have regular contact with them so we can stay aligned with not only what their interests are and what their needs are, but so we can be delivering for them on a regular basis. So I think one thing we try to do and make sure we're doing is these short-term, these weekly or these quarterly goals, we're trying to make sure that they actually are delivering some incremental value to the business as well. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind when making this distinction.
Yeah, definitely. And it's great that you're able to kind of prioritize and know what your short and long-term goals are for your specific business. And so with that, I want to hear more about specific qualities or processes that you think about when thinking about these short-term and long-term successes and goals in the long term. Is there any specific tools that you use or any specific aspects that are important to think about when thinking about these successes?
So one thing that I think is useful to keep in mind is what, like you could think of phrasing like, what do you want to be known for? What do you want this team to be known for, in terms of letting the long-term successes or long-term goals dictate what you want to be doing in the short term. So on the consumer analytics team at HomePoint, we want to be known as the one-stop shop for modeling at HomePoint, and that's not currently the case, but we're working hard to get to that point. And we've made a lot of good progress. The team has really grown tremendously in the past 6 months to a year. So trying to think about like what we want to do in the long term will help influence what projects we work on in the short term. There won't always be perfect alignment there. There'll maybe be some ad hoc requests or something like that. But I think it's definitely a useful guide in terms of determining what's like actually worth working on versus what maybe should we hold off on for a little bit. Another thing I would add there is to celebrate your successes when they happen. Not all successes are going to be huge, but it's worth taking a step back and just taking a moment to recognize that you did accomplish something, whether it was big or small, and that helps you stay focused on the big picture and stay in touch with like what you're doing, why you're really interested in this. For me personally, I've been rewarding myself by doing cooking during the pandemic. It's been a little hard to celebrate too much, but as for the team, we've been doing some kind of goofy games where we're trying to place bets on like where we think Dogecoin will be in the next week and things like that. So it's been a nice way to kind of build some camaraderie.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's so great that that also brings up the idea of just team collaboration and just talking about stuff outside of work, like you had mentioned, like talking about Dogecoin and making bets on that. That's something that kind of makes the team bond also more. What other ways does your team kind of bond together to kind of encourage this team aspect just to be better in general? I also like how you also mentioned talking about successes, even if they're small, just talking about them. So is there anything in addition that you'd like to add to that?
Even beyond the data science team at HomePoint, right now, company-wide, we've been doing, or I guess since the end of January, we've been doing a 45-day cultural challenge where we're trying to do activities, sometimes individually, sometimes as a group, to try and help reinforce the notion of like what are the cultural values at HomePoint. And so this has been another opportunity to kind of just get to know colleagues a little bit better, which is tough to do during the pandemic. In addition to helping with introspection to try to find out like what's really important to us individually and as a company. And so I guess at HomePoint we could sum that up in two words: that we care. That's our tagline. We care about our customers. We care about our employees. Maybe it sounds a little cheesy, but I've really bought into that philosophy, and I think it's made HomePoint a really great place to work, especially during these trying times.
Yeah, definitely. And I really like that. Just keeping updated with everyone from your team, especially like you said during this time when everything's kind of remote, things are pretty crazy.
Yeah.
People are cooped up and not really having that much like people interaction, and that's so important to have for sure. And with you working with a team, you're also one of kind of the leads of the data science team. So how do you define a successful leader? What are some qualities that someone should have?
Yeah. I think what distinguishes a leader from, I don't know, not a leader, or maybe just an individual, is kind of focusing not just on yourself. So maybe an individual contributor, they just have to take care of their work. But in my opinion, a leader is someone who can take care of the people that need to take care of the actual work. So I think that there's kind of that change in thinking where you're not putting yourself first, and I think that's a crucial aspect to being a leader.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you so much for sharing about this. It's important to kind of know some qualities that are important to have as a leader. But I wanted to kind of stray away from the tech work that you have at Home Point now and talk more about any hobbies that you've been doing lately. I see you have a bike in your background. Is that
Yeah.
a hobby that you've been picking up during just this time of the remote world, or what have you been kind of doing to pass the time?
Yeah, I've been doing some bike riding indoors. I'm in the Boston area, so it's been kind of cold out. So I'm riding my own bike on a platform called Zwift. It's in some sense a competitor to Peloton, but you use your own bike. Other than that, it has a subscription service kind of similar to Peloton. All my friends are on Zwift, so I have no interest in Peloton. But I mentioned I've been doing some cooking. I've been getting into plants a little bit. I have a whole bunch of plants now. It's very, very different from where we were a year and a half ago.
Yeah, definitely. And have you just started taking care of plants? How has that been? I always hear that it's so hard to just keep up with them, the maintenance of them.
I'm totally new to this. So I'm learning a lot of basic things like, I would have never guessed beforehand that you couldn't just water all the plants the same amount, but some plants like basil really like a lot of water. Other plants like succulents, they don't need to be watered at all, hardly. But no plants have died on my watch, and so I'm considering that a success, and I have celebrated that a little bit as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a great way to keep busy during this time also. So that's awesome. I'm so grateful for your time today, Chris. Where can everybody find you online to connect with you?
I think the best place to reach me professionally would be on LinkedIn. There are a bunch of Chris Murphys on LinkedIn. So if you can't find me specifically, the link is Chris-W-Murphy. But I think that would be the best place to start.
Yeah, perfect. And to our audience, for more information on the data standard, you can find us at www.datastandard.io, as well as our LinkedIn and YouTube page. So thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. It was such a pleasure to have you today.
Thanks. It was my pleasure to be here. Thank you very much, Catherine, for having me.